Track 15. How has the place you live in changed recently?
Well, in my city, there is a lot more traffic than there used to be. This is because of the new business centre, which has brought a lot more people to the city for work. This has made the city richer than it was. In fact, that's the most significant difference. The city is not as poor as it was 10 years ago.
So, you're studying here in Sydney. How is your town or city different from Sydney?
There are quite a few differences, such as the shop opening hours. The shops in Tokyo stay open much later than those here in Sydney. Then there's the transport system, which is more efficient and convenient. But the weather is the same as here in Australia.
Is it a good place to live?
Yes, it's really nice. I think it's considerably better than other cities in my country because it's more modern. It's also got a lot of parks, which I really like, and this means that it's not nearly as crowded as some places.
Track 16.
I think our presentation should focus on why living in the countryside has become more attractive to families nowadays than in the past.
I'm not so sure. Although the statistics Professor Davies showed us in the lecture gave the impression that there are more families moving to the country now than at any time during the last 20 years, he also mentioned that there aren't as many available houses in suburban areas, so many families don't have as much choice as before.
Yes, Suzanne, you're right. Perhaps that's actually more important. People think that the same housing stock exists as in the past, but that's not true. How about we focus our presentation on the fact that the choice of location for families is not as wide as during the 1980s, and this is what is affecting the trend of moving to the countryside.
OK, I think you've thought about the presentation a lot more clearly than me.
Thanks.
I think Helen's right. We want Professor Davies to think that we have done as much research for the presentation as we could, and not only use the reading list.
Yes, you're right. Otherwise, our final grade won't be nearly as good as our last presentation, so we need to read as widely as possible.
Track 17.
So, Greg, Kirsty, have you done much research for our project yet?
I haven't done as much reading as I'd planned to, but I've got quite a lot of books and journal articles that might be relevant.
Good work, Greg. I think I might have worked out how we can approach the project and give it a more specific focus than the title that Dr. Jones suggested, which is too vague.
Oh, really? How's that?
Well, we know that the new 7 wonders of the world were chosen a few years ago, but I think that how they were chosen and what this says about people's relationships to their architectural and natural national heritage is far more interesting than just doing a project that describes what they are and why they were chosen. What do you think, Alison?
You know, I think you could be right there. Didn't Dr. Jones mention something in our last lecture about how many more people voted for some of the wonders than the total number of people in the country?
That did happen. In a sense, it wasn't really a voting system at all. It's more like a TV talent show. It wasn't nearly as scientific as political voting systems because people could vote as many times as they wanted, and it was all done via the internet, so it only applied to people with access to a computer. And most of the votes for the wonders came from the country's own citizens.
That's interesting. I think, therefore, that we can show how the modern choices were different from the original 7 wonders of the ancient world because the original wonders were chosen by travellers, while the latest list was chosen by people from the same country as the wonder itself. From this, we can analyse the choices and how having a building or site on this list could be more advantageous to some countries than others. For example, countries which rely less heavily than others on tourism may not have been nearly as interested in the whole competition as those who wanted to boost visitor numbers. Then we could compare this with how travellers chose the previous wonders.
OK, now I understand, and yes, I think it's a great idea. Let's do it.
Yes, I think that'll really give us an edge compared to the other students. It'll make the final project considerably more original. Remember, Dr. Jones isn't expecting much from us, given the result for our last project. But I'm just slightly worried that we might not have as much time as we'd like to do the reading.
I see what you mean. Well, why don't we do as much reading of these books and journals as we can, and then meet again on Friday to make a final decision on content?
That's a good idea, Alison.
Absolutely. Then we can make sure we won't read too much and we'll still have enough time for the actual project writing. Track 18. How can crime be prevented?
Crime prevention must start from education. If people are not raised well, then they might commit crimes in the future. It's the responsibility of both parents and schools to educate children in the difference between right and wrong. This could be done in special ethics classes in schools, and perhaps parenting classes might be a good idea for parents who are unsure of how to raise children with more moral values. These classes shouldn't be compulsory, though, as this might be too expensive and unnecessary. However, although all parents might not go, it could be useful for those who are struggling. More information could help these parents.
Track 20. Why do you think people become criminals?
Because life can be difficult for some people. Crime can present an easy way to get things they want in life. Even though people know they shouldn't do it, the temptation could be very strong, especially if they're in a desperate situation. Although they ought to work hard or get help, sometimes they just can't.
What do you think the role of prisons should be? Punishment or rehabilitation?
I think prisons should focus on rehabilitation more. This is because those prisoners will one day be back on the streets, and so education might make them better in society. Prisons ought to help solve the problem of crime. I think being in prison is punishment enough, and so while people are in prisons, there should be some kind of constructive effort to change their behaviour.
What do you think is the best way to deal with juvenile crime?
Young people must have role models. This might prevent some young people getting involved in crime in the first place. Parents have to take responsibility for their children too. In fact, I think parents should be fined if their children commit a crime. I think this might be quite a good answer, as children can't always know right or wrong without their parents telling them.
Do you think people commit crimes because of violence on TV or in video games?
No, I don't. People don't have to do what they see on a screen. People have their own minds and can tell the difference between reality or fiction. People can see violence on the news. It doesn't make everyone who watches the news a potential criminal. People who are influenced by games and TV in this way probably have an underlying problem.
Is crime always linked to poverty?
Not always. Although I think that some crime is because of poverty, there are other factors which we ought to consider. For example, plain greed, laziness, mental illness and personal problems could also contribute to some crimes. We can look at things like crimes of passion or fraud, which are not always committed due to poverty, as examples.
Track 21.
Hi, everyone. So, let's get started on our essay. Mark, have you done the research from last week?
Well, yes and no. I was trying to follow up on the suggestions from the lecture, and I searched the library for books and journals, but I couldn't find anything relevant to our topic.
Well, maybe you were too late. We got the essay title 2 weeks ago, so other students might have taken out all the books already.
Yes, I guess so.
It doesn't sound likely to me. All the books couldn't have been taken out. There's lots of books about astronomy in the main library.
Well, there was one book, but I couldn't borrow it because it's a reference-only book.
We should have started this project earlier. What are we going to do now?
The other students must have been very keen to start. Well, don't worry. Why don't we just reserve the books we want? I found some articles we can start reading now, and then we'll be more focused for when the other students return the books we need.
Track 22. So, Abby, can Helen and I show you our presentation to see if you think it's okay?
Of course, no problem.
Thanks a lot. OK, first of all, we're going to show the explorer's route on the map here and explain what happened on the expedition by highlighting some key events.
Right.
And we think it's important to mention that the expedition started quite badly. You see, the original base camp had to be moved. The original plan was to start from the tree line at the bottom of the mountain, but the explorers couldn't set up camp there because of the rain, so they moved higher up.
The idea is to highlight the importance of planning in exploratory expeditions. The Robertson team should have known that they couldn't have started from the tree line in the rainy season.
Yes, they really should have checked that.
In the end, the camp was set up on the edge of the snow line. OK, so moving on. Joan Robertson and her team found several new plant species on the lower slopes of the peak, and when they were halfway up the mountain, they came across some fossils which they worked out were from dinosaurs.
How did they know the fossils were from dinosaurs? Surely they couldn't have identified them so easily whilst on the expedition.
But that's the important point. This team were not just explorers, but also scientists. In order to make the trip more useful, they took scientific equipment to analyse anything they found, so they were able to identify the dinosaur fossils correctly.
It's good to make this clear if your project is supposed to be about the importance of scientific expeditions rather than exploratory ones.
Absolutely.
So, am I right to think that the Robertson expedition took longer as a result of the research?
Well, they should have taken longer because they were conducting a lot of experiments, but modern technology enabled them to do the experiments and reach the summit in under 4 weeks. In fact, they arrived at the top on day 26 of the trip. Track 23.
Hi, Penny. Hi, Terry.
Hi.
How are you both getting on with your natural disaster essays? I can't believe we all chose the same subject of earthquakes. I found it really interesting.
Yes, it is interesting, Andrew, but I could have made the topic narrower. There is so much to cover. It's really hard to organise the information I've found.
But that just gives you more to write about. I'd rather have too much material than not enough. I think Andrew is right. I found the topic fascinating too.
Maybe. I'm not so sure, Terry. Andrew, how have you done on the statistics research? That's what you were researching when I last saw you.
It's been interesting, but I had to look really hard for relevant information.
But you found some in the end?
Yes, I've got lots of statistics on past earthquakes and where the plates are more unstable.
That's great. I've been working on plate movement. I think by adding this to my essay, I'll have a really good foundation of how earthquakes come about.
I was looking at future earthquake predictions, but I didn't find much information actually. I should have focused more on how earthquakes are scientifically identified and measured. I think that would have been more relevant.
That's a shame. Well, why don't we compare some of the information we've found? It might all give us some ideas of what to read next.
Well, it turns out that many earthquakes could have been predicted according to the frequency of past earthquakes in the area.
Really? Well, that's not what I found out at all. I think you should go back and check that.
I don't know. Maybe I should.
Well, My research looks particularly at how convergence and divergence of the plates causes movement of the Earth. We sometimes forget that the planet is not a still object, but actually it is constantly moving. This causes things like new seas, mountains, and earthquakes. The whole world is moving. Terry, didn't your research find anything?
Unfortunately not. I think I need to research another area, as I couldn't see any evidence of earthquakes being predictable.
Well, I can also show you what I've got, and maybe that will help.
Oh, thanks. Track 25.
How do you think globalization might change the world in the future?
I think that if globalization continues to develop, young people of the future will have a different understanding of things like nationality and culture.
Has globalization caused young people to care less about their countries?
I don't think so. If globalization had caused young people to care less about their countries, we wouldn't see so much national pride in sporting competitions like the Olympics or the World Cup.
What would you say to someone who thinks that globalization is ruining the world?
I would say that they should be more positive. If globalization didn't exist, we wouldn't have so many opportunities for work or travel, and we wouldn't be able to buy so many different products.
Can globalization make the world a more equal place?
I think this depends on what you mean by equal. If people in a country have the same opportunities in life, then globalization is good and can help the world. But this is not always what happens.
Track 26.
What are the main disadvantages of globalization?
In my opinion, the main disadvantages are for cultures which aren't particularly strong. I think globalization could in fact destroy some small local cultures. When my parents were young, the local dialect in our town was spoken all the time. But now more and more people in the town are from other countries and our dialect isn't spoken so much. If globalization hadn't transformed the way people move around the world, our town wouldn't have changed so much and we might still be using our local dialect.
Do you think globalization has made the world a better place?
Well, in many ways, yes. I think in general people have more knowledge about the world due to globalization. For example, if I hadn't studied in Australia, I wouldn't speak English as well as I do, and I wouldn't have lots of friends from around the world.
How has globalization changed the way we travel and communicate?
I think it has changed things greatly. The world is a much smaller place than it was, say, 50 years ago. If I wanted to go to the other side of the world, I could get there in a day. And that's incredible. And not only is it easier to travel, we can now communicate with people on the other side of the world instantly through things like virtual messaging and webcams. If we didn't have this kind of progress in travel and communication, we would know a lot less about other cultures, and I think that would be a pity.
How has globalization benefited people in your country?
It's made a really big difference to how people in my country see themselves in relation to other countries. And I think that people will see more benefits in the future if they continue to be open-minded about it.
What are the consequences of allowing large companies to sell their products all over the world?
I think it's great. I know some people think that it's negative, but I don't. I think that everyone should have the opportunity to grow their company. All companies started small, but if you make good products, people will buy them. If there had been strict laws against international trade, the world economy wouldn't have grown as much, and everyone would have suffered.
Track 27.
Well, my best friend once gave me some really good advice when I was younger. I used to worry a lot about my appearance when I was a teenager, and it made me feel unconfident. I often thought people were staring at me and thinking that I looked bad. Once, one of my classmates asked me where I'd bought my clothes, and I thought it was a criticism. My friend told me not to worry about the way I looked. She said that all teenagers felt that way and recommended concentrating on having fun instead. It was quite difficult, but I tried to focus more on studying and my hobbies. After a while, I felt better, and my parents said that I had changed and become more outgoing. I was really pleased with this, and as a result, my confidence increased even more. So, I think, yes, I would give this advice to other teenagers. Although it's difficult advice to follow, I think it can really help young people who are going through a hard time. It's really important to be positive and understand that this period of your life involves lots of changes in your personality, but that in the end you will feel fine.
Track 28.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my weekly show about fitness. Today, I want to talk about ways you can improve your fitness without having to join a gym or sports center. Now, first of all, it is important to decide what you want to achieve. Many people want to improve their health in general, but other people want to focus on losing weight. I use a combination of both strength building and weight loss exercise to maintain my fitness level, but I know a couple who go walking twice a week to maintain theirs. The most important thing is to do something you like. For example, martial arts, hiking, tennis, or water sports. These are all good as cardiovascular exercise and strength training. One excellent way is to join a local club because you will meet other people with the same interests as you. It is also important to keep up motivation levels, and exercising with other people can be a good way to do this. And don't forget about the local park. It is a great place to exercise for free. Sometimes parks provide a running track or other communal facilities, all of which are free to use.
Track 29.
Thank you for coming to this talk on the Australian Film Institute, or AFI as most of us know it. We pride ourselves on the work we have done over the last 50 years, and I hope to let you know how we will keep promoting and developing this great country's film industry. I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of history about the AFI. Then I'll go on to tell you about the work we're involved in at the moment, and then tell you a little bit about what the future holds for the AFI. So, let's start at the beginning. 1958 is an important date in our history, as it was when the Institute was founded. Since then, we've been working continuously for the following purpose: to promote film and television in Australia. I think, however, our celebrated Film and Television Awards are what we at the AFI are most well known for, which do indeed fulfil our aims of promotion of the industry. In fact, we think these awards have also elevated the standards of Australian film since their inception in the 60s. We're incredibly proud of them. The awards became so popular that we expanded them. In 1986, TV categories were added to the list of prestigious awards we offered. The awards have grown in popularity and status over the years, and there is no doubt that we are one of the leading film and television award ceremonies in the country. We have just recently held our 50th anniversary, which took place at Melbourne's Princess Theatre. Some big names in the film and television industry were there, and it was a real celebration of success. Now, this leads me up to our present work and how we're going to...